is 1600 hours on June 6, 1944, Sector Lion-sur-Mer. First Lieutenant Helmut Ritgen, a commander in Panzer Regiment 22, stabilizes his body inside the turret of his Panzer IV. The smell inside the steel hull is a toxic mixture of burnt oil, the acrid sweat of the 5-man crew, and the chemical smoke of the 7.5-centimeter cartridges. He pushes up his goggles, which have left deep marks on his soot-stained face. Through the optics of his commander's cupola, a narrow strip of blue glitters between the dunes. It is the sea. He has reached the objective that thousands of Allied soldiers sought to prevent at the cost of their lives. Behind him stand the smoking, overheated engines of the 21st Panzer Division. Before him lies the open flank of the British invasion. Between the landing beaches, Sword and Juno, a gap of exactly 5 kilometers yawns, undefended, open, vulnerable. A single determined advance, a coordinated movement of this armored mass, could split the Allied bridgeheads now and turn Operation Overlord into a catastrophe before sunset. It is the moment for which the German strategy of resistance at the water's edge was designed. Yet Ritgen does not give the order to attack. He gives no order for a breakthrough. He waits. He stares at a surf darkened by thousands of masts and hulls of the largest fleet in human history. In this moment of absolute, almost unnatural silence, in which the fate of Europe dances on a razor's edge, the analysis of a total systemic failure begins. Why does the strongest armored power on the continent freeze at the exact second it holds strategic victory in its hands? The answer lies not in a lack of courage among the men at the front, but in the agony of a bureaucratic structure that destroys itself in its own paralysis. Today, we dissect not just a battle, but the mechanical, logistical, and psychological suffocation of an elite unit in the face of its greatest opportunity. The 21st Panzer Division is an operational anomaly in the German order of battle in the summer of 1944. Originally destroyed in North Africa and reconstituted in France, it is the only armored unit stationed directly within reach of the coast. With 146 tanks, mainly modernized Panzer IV Ausführung H and a variety of assault guns on captured French chassis, it represents the only mobile fire brigade in the eastern sector of Caen. It is the scalpel intended to cut out the landing. But on the morning of June 6th, this division operates in a vacuum of chain of command erosion and bureaucratic agony. The strategic problem has a name: Panzer-Reserve West. It is an administrative monster, created from Hitler's deep mistrust of his own generals. Without the explicit personal approval from the Führer's headquarters, not a single tank of the reserve may be moved. And in Berchtesgaden, they are sleeping. The adjutants do not dare to wake the dictator. Lieutenant General Edgar Feuchtinger, the commander of the 21st Panzer Division, is nowhere to be found during the first critical hours between 0200 and 0600 a.m. He is in Paris, hundreds of kilometers away from the rumble of the guns. As the sun rises over Normandy, the German system has already lost what no tank can buy back. The friction in the hierarchy acts like sand thrown into the gears of a high-performance engine. While the Allies use every second to pump tons of material onto the beach, the German crews remain in their assembly areas in the woods south of Caen. They sit on their tanks, smoke, and listen to the distant, dull echo of naval artillery, while their officers desperately try to establish contact with headquarters that have long since ceased to function. At 1000 hours, far too late for a decisive blow against the first wave, the division finally sets itself in motion. But the operational plan is already outdated by the reality of the landing. Instead of acting as a closed armored fist, the division is split by order of the Corps. One part is ordered east to attack the British paratroopers at the hard-fought Bréville Ridge, a war of attrition in hedges and orchards, for which tanks were never built. The other part, Panzer Regiment 22 under Colonel von Luck, is to force the corridor between the landing zones. The friction begins in the narrow, debris-strewn streets of Caen. The city is not a transit point. It is a logistical bottleneck of deadly precision. Allied fighter bombers, the Jabos, Typhoons, and P-47 Thunderbolts control the sky with absolute dominance. A tank regiment on an open road in June 1944 is no longer an attacker, but a defenseless target. The average speed of the advance drops to less than 8 kilometers per hour. Forensic analysis of the movement. Let us consider the mechanics of this failure. A Panzer IV requires several seconds and high fuel consumption for a 90-degree turn in a narrow street. In the burning ruins of Caen, where the Royal Navy's ship artillery has already turned entire blocks into piles of rubble, every intersection becomes a risk. Maybach HL 120 engines work at their limit. The cooling systems are optimized for desert warfare, but the thick dust of the bombed city clogs the radiator fins in minutes. The commanders must hide their vehicles under ruins and camouflage nets as soon as the characteristic high-pitched whistle of aircraft turbines swells in the sky. Every 10-minute delay in the streets of Caen means a loss of 2 kilometers of defensive ground clearance at the beach. Logistics is no longer a supporting element here. It is the primary enemy. The roads are lined with burning Wehrmacht trucks, whose flaming wrecks cost valuable minutes, while engineers try to push them aside with tow bars. The clock of the invasion ticks in time with the Allied unloading rates, and the 21st Division loses the connection every minute. Around 1500 hours, the operational load limit reaches its 0 point. The spearheads of Panzer Regiment 22 under Lieutenant Colonel von Oppeln-Bronikowski approach the strategically decisive ridge of Perrier-sur-le-Don. From this elevation, a panorama offers itself that for a moment looks like victory. The German crews look directly down onto the British landing zones, white and red. They see the unprotected flank of the invasion. They are not alone on this height. What follows is not a conventional tank battle, but an industrial execution. The British 3rd Division has perfectly camouflaged a barrier of 17-pounder anti-tank guns and Sherman tanks of the Staffordshire Yeomanry on the ridge. As soon as the Panzer IVs cross the hilltop and silhouette themselves against the bright afternoon sky, the system collapses. The British 17-pounder shells have a muzzle velocity of over 880 meters per second. They penetrate the 80mm front armor of the Panzer IV at 1,000 meters with ballistic ease, as if it were made of glass. Inside the German turrets, the men hear the whiplash of the projectiles, a sound like a tearing metal tarp, followed by a hard impact. Forensics of the hit. When a 17-pounder shell hits the armor, the dreaded spalling effect occurs. The force of the impact causes the inside of the steel plate to shatter, without the shell necessarily having to penetrate the tank completely. Thousands of glowing metal fragments race through the cramped interior like buckshot. Gunners are shredded at their optics, loaders lose limbs, while the hydraulic oil of the turret traverse system catches fire. Ritgen observes through his optics as one tank after another goes up in a flash of flame, the so-called Ronson syndrome. The crews trying to climb out of the burning wrecks are mown down by British infantry machine guns. Within just 15 minutes, the regiment loses the majority of its spearhead. This is the true peak of failure, the realization that the German primacy of armor has become meaningless against the industrial firepower of the Allies. The remnants of the regiment reach the dunes of Lion-sur-Mer at 1600 hours. They stand at the sea. The visual promise is fulfilled. They reached the sea, but there is no triumph. The warfare here is characterized by asymmetric violence for which there is no tactical recipe. The Royal Navy has long since located the tanks. British forward observers on the beach have transmitted the coordinates to the fleet by radio. Destroyers sail to within a few hundred meters of the shallow coast and fire direct flat trajectory shots into the German positions. Then the heavy units join in, HMS Warspite and HMS Ramillies. The ballistic agony. A 15-inch shell weighs nearly 900 kilograms. Its trajectory is a physical inevitability. When such a shell impacts, the dunes literally evaporate. The pressure wave is so immense that it causes the lungs of the men in the tanks to collapse, even if they are not directly hit. The brains of the crews suffer severe concussions from the massive vibrations of the ground. The precision Zeiss optics become misaligned under the ballistic hammer of the Navy. The tanks are now effectively blind and deaf. Ritgen describes a brittle silence in the pauses between fire, a fragile silence in which one hears only the crackling of burning rubber and the distant roar of the surf. They fire back with their 7.5-centimeter cannons at the gray silhouettes of the ships, but the shells bounce fruitlessly off the massive belt armor of the battleships. It is the moment of total operational impotence. At 2100 hours, the order to retreat is given. The division leaves behind 70 burning tanks. Almost half of its entire substance bled out in this one afternoon. The balance of June 6 for the 21st Panzer Division is forensically clear and devastating. It died as a strategic instrument on this day. The attempt to throw the invasion into the sea failed because of the systemic superiority of Allied fire, total air dominance, and German command paralysis. The bridgehead holds. Sword, Juno, and Gold merge into a continuous front. But for the Allies, this victory is a Pyrrhic one with heavy consequences. The primary objective of the first day, the capture of the strategic city of Caen, has vanished in the smoking ruins of the delayed German counterthrust. The city will now become the scene of one of the bloodiest battles of attrition in history. The focus now turns to Day 3. Montgomery needs a new plan, Operation Perch. But what he doesn't know, while he redraws his maps at headquarters, heavy railway transport wagons are rolling in from the east. The phase of the Panzer IV ends here. The era of the heavy giants begins. In the next episode, we analyze the moment when British confidence meets the 8.8-centimeter cannons of the heavy SS Panzer Battalion 101. One name will dominate the battlefield: SS Hauptsturmführer Michael Wittmann.